All right, everyone. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Aware Athlete Show. The Aware Athlete, connecting to the life you want. So, today we're very privileged to have with us as our guest Jeff Haller, and Jeff is a Feldenkrais practitioner. He's the founder of the Feldenkrais Training Academy and the IOPS Academy. That's IOPS, stands for Ideal Organization and Profound Strength. Jeff also has experience with Tai Chi and yoga, and especially with Aikido. So he's been a Feldenkrais trainer and teacher for over 30 years. And so, Jeff, welcome to the show. Thank you for being
Thank
here.
you.
Yeah. So we'll dive in here. There are a lot of people listening that may listen to this that may not have an understanding of what the Feldenkrais method is. I could say a couple things, or I could just turn that over to you. But I think we have probably quite a few people who would. We have a culture that's obsessed with strength, especially in the rehab area, performance area, obsessed with strength, I think. And so people might be very interested in what is strength, what is it physically, practically, what is profound strength, and what is ideal organization. So, Jeff, I'll let you take it from there for a moment. What's the Feldenkrais method and what's the IOPS Academy?
Well, let's go back to 1972. And I was a varsity athlete at Oregon State University where I played basketball. And in the spring of 1972, I went to one of my classes, and my professor the weekend before had been to a class with Feldenkrais in Portland, Oregon. And he brought back to my class about 15 minutes of what was called awareness through movement. And being the bizarre person that I am, I found in those 15 minutes more implicit intelligence than any moment that I experienced of running up and down the court and learning motor skills training in basketball for the 5 years that I've been at Oregon State. There was something so unique, so profound, so confounding, because I was a part of the established way that we train athletes. And in those 15 minutes, I experienced neurological variability in a way that I never had before. There was an immediacy to what I experienced that profoundly impacted me. And I'm sure that I was the only person in that class that had that experience, because I'm pretty sure that out of those 40 people in that class, I'm the only one who pursued, even for a moment, that sensation, that world. Right after that time, I was at that professor's house, and he had a book on his shelf on his counter. It was called Awareness Through Movement, and it was Moshe's book that he wrote in 1972. So I was looking at a first edition copy of the book, and I read that book with profound interest. And it was clearly speaking to a potential that lies within us that is untapped. And most of our motor skills training processes don't rely on the other aspect of our nervous system, which is the sensory system. And if we're going to improve our performance, and we're going to have a greater command over ourselves, and it's always, when I was an athlete, it was said that you can't really train a person to become coordinated. You either have it or you don't. Then we for a long time have been able to disprove that idea, that people can in fact acquire ways of coordinating themselves through action that they never could imagine before. So I became really, really interested in Moshe's material. And Moshe's material required us to do something that's really quite different than, over and over again rote motor skills training. He required us to pay attention to ourselves, to tune our attention into ourselves, and to use the prefrontal aspect of our brain, which in the prefrontal aspect for many people, it's a new term for them, but the prefrontal aspect of our brain, it's the highest, it's the most latest part of our brain's evolution. And it has features that we rarely use when we're training ourselves as athletes. It has the ability, first and foremost, to make discriminations. And if we're going to learn something new, you cannot learn something that's new behavior until you can make discriminations. Otherwise, you'll continue to engage yourself in what is your past behavior. So you must be able to make discriminations. And their prefrontal cortex is interested in such things as novelty, spontaneity, imagery. It has the capacity to dream a potential for ourselves that's outside of the way that we were conditioned by the environment that we were raised in. And so Feldenkrais's work for the athlete is, in one sense, primary if you have a dream for fulfilling your dreams as an athlete.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's so profound. It's so different from, what we're used to, because often a coach he'll give a whole bunch of tips, or he'll yell at somebody and tell them to do this or that, but they don't get a chance to slow down and actually experiment with, different ways of doing things. One of the nice things about the Feldenkrais method, it's profound, and it's also gentle, and it's gentle in more ways than one. I think it's a gentle way to bring somebody into a learning environment, rather than you yell at them and say, you're gonna run some laps now.
Yeah, I mean, in my day, you were never late for practice because it was too painful to be late.
Yeah.
You paid some
and that's a good
serious
habit.
dues.
Show up.
Yeah, I mean, it was attend practice out of duress rather than attend practice because it's the most interesting and vital thing that you'll do in your life. There was, and it was in some ways it wasn't. It was about fulfilling a sense of self-worth that was based on goal orientation rather than coming into a profound sense of something within yourself that you want to manifest.
Yeah.
And
so all our lives we sort of distract ourselves, and especially with goal, being, I think, Moshe with ATMs, he would say sometimes you'll get a little reward out of them.
Sure.
You'll be able to do something you couldn't do at first, but that's not the point. The point was the process you went through to get that reward.
Well, and, Moshe was very, very clear, and he would say, well, we take that which is impossible, and that may mean a kind of coordinated movement sequence that's in the beginning impossible or so difficult it's not available to us. And then in the process of the lesson, we would make it possible. And then we would go through a process neurologically where we would find the means within ourselves to make it easy. And in time, the ease would turn into elegance. It would manifest as something that was such a unique expression of ourselves. And it might be a simple function. I mean, for example, you take your athletes that are listening to this podcast, and you have them lie on the floor facing downwards and ask them to, in a singular movement, without hesitation, come to standing in such a way that when they come to standing, they're turning exactly the opposite direction to their head. And they make that movement in one single continuous movement. Now, for the most part, that would be impossible for them. In fact, if you went into most martial arts dojos here in the Seattle area where I'm from, and asked them to make that movement, which, if you think about it, would be an absolute obvious movement for any martial artist to be able to be lying in a position and to turn and face any other direction, to go from lying to standing in a singular movement for self-preservation. And you and you ask them to make the movement, and none of them will, almost not none, but almost none of them will have the means, the immediate means in their nervous system for their own biological fitness to be able to make that movement. So in the beginning, it's impossible.
Yeah.
So then you have to build the ingredients of the lesson. You have to coordinate, and you have to make a coordination. You have to create a completely brand new motor plan that has never existed before within your nervous system. It's never been asked for. You could be the best basketball player in the world, the best at anything in the world. And if I ask you to do this, you'll still have to make a new motor plan because it's outside of anything you've ever done before. It's novel. And if you're curious, it's interesting. But then you have to build together the pieces of how you coordinate your limbs, and you'll coordinate them with timing, you'll coordinate them with orientation, and you'll bring together all of yourself into such a way that you can make the action. You'll go through a clumsy phase, eventually it'll become a little easier, and in time that will become possible. And in general, the way that we teach a class like this, it'll take an hour. It's not going to take you weeks. It's not going to take you months.
Yeah.
It's something that you can accomplish within yourself to go from impossible to elegant in an hour's time. And that contributes to your overall sense of well-being, your overall biological sense of fitness, your ability for self-preservation, because anybody who's safe in themselves, who's secure in themselves, has the freedom to be on the floor and to get away from the floor and to go to the floor and to get away from the floor without hesitation. The floor is our friend. But you won't find that. You will not find that in any traditional athletic training. And you really won't find it even in the beginning ways that most people learn judo falls or aikido falls. For the most part, people start in a position that's awful and clumsy and damage themselves. Many dojos fail simply because they can't keep their membership because the anxiety about learning how to fall is too much for the people. And they use their will to overcome falling rather than learning to love the art of being with the floor and moving elegantly relative to the floor.
Yeah, the floor is your friend.
The floor becomes your friend.
Yeah, yeah. So what you just did, you gave an excellent example of the whole process there. But I think, and that would be probably a wonderful way to start with people. But in terms of I think there's just as great a learning process that we still could have in front of us if we want to, deepening our learning about the activities that we do all the time.
Sure.
Yeah. But where you started really makes the process obvious.
Well,
you start.
Yeah, well, you have to. I think you have to have some description that people can relate to. Now, I mean, so every athlete performs with the body they have, with the genetic gifts they have. But very few athletes, unless you're speaking, it's becoming more common to understand ground forces. In other words, if you watch the Golf Channel, I watch on occasion. I used to be a decent golfer, but the golfers now know that what they're really, really seeking is ground forces. They're seeking for the skeleton to be organized in such a way that they utilize ground forces to come through their skeleton so that they can make the quickest and most complete movement of their skeleton possible. And it is becoming a completely skeletal art. No matter how strong and how thick and how big the guys are, they understand that in efficiency means that to pass the force through their skeleton without shearing across themselves, so that you can generate the absolute quickest, greatest speed possible. And so that's what an offensive lineman does. He understands how to use the ground. You start to watch people. A shot putter understands that they're not pushing against the ground. They're actually lifting themselves away from the ground. And the clearest pathway from the ground through the skeleton, through their arm, through their torso, through their arm, through the weight, is what provides the impetus by which the weight moves.
Wow.
And the more efficient they are in making that movement, the greater chance they have to move mass. That's what an Olympic lift is. You go and you watch the Olympic lifters and they watch them do power cleans, watch them do snatches, watch them do clean and jerk. And the entire process is how do they generate force through their skeleton? And the athlete that can get under the bar with their skeleton quicker, more efficiently, more clearly has the chance of making the lift. And that depends on the degree to which they can find the flexibility in their pelvis and their hips to be able to actually move into the position that they can actually get under the bar. A lot of that is genetically gifted and a lot of it can be improved.
Yeah, the Olympic lifts are very interesting to watch. They have a really high skill component. You know, I used to like to do deadlifts and so on, and I could clean a certain amount of weight, but it was just because it was a certain amount of weight. To get to double the weight that I could clean would take a lot more skill than I had at the time.
Well, the top athletes are going twice their body weight.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, that's absolutely amazing. It's totally what you said, a matter of utilization of the skeleton and of speed and coordination and timing.
Yeah.
And flexibility. You have to, a lot of those power lifters can come into a very nice squat very quickly.
And they are under the bar so quickly, and you can't come up and through the bar unless you're under the bar.
Right.
If that bar is an inch further forward, your ability to come through it, if you're in a clean position, and that bar is 1 inch, or when you make the squat, and you've got the bar 1 inch forward, there's no way in the world that you can drive through your skeleton and lift the bar.
Yeah. And that's
years ago. I was teaching Feldenkrais classes. I was invited by a trainer, Beatrice Walterspiel, and so she would invited me to be in Norway in early December, late November, early December. It was really dark a lot of the day, but I was always there at the time when the European Olympic championships, weightlifting championships, were being given. And so on the television, I could watch from dawn until dusk in the evening as they went through all the weight classes, men and women. I could watch the lifts. And so I got pretty good in watching, and I could determine who was going to make the lift and who wasn't. Just in the way that they actually set up to the bar.
Wow.
You can become pretty clear as to whether they're embodied within themselves in a way that the potential is there, or whether there's an external sense that they're efforting to get there.
Yeah, and when you're at such a high level like that, things have got to be pretty right in terms of use of the skeleton.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's true for every athletic activity. Athletic activity. And there are elements within us that we hide our capacity, that we don't know. For example, I'm teaching my son how to play basketball. Yeah. He's 18 years old, and so I'm sort of his shooting coach. And one of the things that if I ask him to walk in a very tight circle around himself, he walks in a very tight circle around himself in such a way that he can walk in a tight circle, pivoting around his right foot, going, in essence, clockwise. And if you ask him to walk around himself counterclockwise, he actually he doesn't walk in as tight a circle. What that means is that if he's coming around a screen going to his left, when he plants his right foot and he comes around the screen and he wants to face to the basket, it's easy for him to turn himself to face to the basket. And his jump shot comes out of a well-organized, well-oriented shot that faces the basket. If he's going around the screen to the right, the way that he organizes himself, he plants his left foot, There's a subtle way in which he plants his left foot that makes it so that he can't pivot around his left hip as freely, which means that he has a tendency to fade away on that side rather than turn to the basket. So on one side, he shoots a fadeaway, and on the other side, he shoots a shot that's going up and through to the basket. Now, most people never have a chance to find these things out because no one ever asks these questions. They don't really, they do this with rote practice, but no one points this out to them. And this is true in every athletic endeavor, as to even the process by which you grip a golf club, as to how you bring the club to the ball, whether you lower, how you lower yourself, how you fold yourself, determines the way in which your system is prepared to make the movement. So these can be studied. Athletes can be given questions, asked questions. They can learn to observe these differences. And once they can finally recognize differences, it's at that point that they can begin to modulate their behavior. They can begin to play with the questions. And that is the essence of the Feldenkrais method, which is to ask very specific questions so the person can turn their attention inward and find answers within themselves and bring about the potential to organize themselves to a higher level, because they've been asked a question that's specific and they become curious about it.
So you just mentioned that if an athlete who is an doing Olympic lift that requires speed and timing and all of that,
Sure.
if they're 1 inch off where the bar is in front
Sure.
of them when they go into a squat, then the whole thing has no chance to reach its potential.
Exactly.
Maybe, yeah. So the thing is, it's a major revelation when you realize, I think, that small things, small discriminations can make all the difference or can make a huge change.
Sure.
And yeah, and not everybody has that. If you watch football players, some percentage of them get injured when nobody's anywhere near them and nobody touched them. It's just the way they completed a movement in an inefficient way, maybe collapse. They'll go ahead on their own and collapse on the inside of their knee or something like that. Nobody touches them.
I've seen far too many torn Achilles tendons in my life. I've seen far too many, patellar tendon tears. I've seen, and of course ACL tears. And almost invariably, it's a way in which the forces have been sheared through the body by some slippage, by some accidents. Oftentimes it's force related in the game of football, but in basketball you oftentimes see, the tear happen with oftentimes, of course, there's wear and tear where there's been a long wearing against the system because of some inefficiency that's been hidden.
Yeah.
It's funny to think of, the injuries that we watch athletes have when I don't know, the subtlety within. I mean, few people really truly understand. Most people, for example, will have footbeds in their shoes to arrange the sole of their foot. But that doesn't mean that they understand skeletally how to use the architecture of the foot in the most appropriate way.
Yeah.
No athlete will tell you that their muscle tone is dependent upon how specific they find their support surface, the surface of their foot, the surface they're sitting on. Your muscle tone is completely dependent upon how specific you are, because if you're inadequate or you're maladjusted in the way that you organize yourself relative to the ground, you must, in order to keep yourself oriented in space, engage musculature to keep your head upright, to keep your teleceptors upright, your eyes, your ears, your nose, your sense of yourself upright in the world. And that those patterns of organization to keep yourself upright take place in less than 5/10 of a second, 5/100 of a second. It's incredible how fast the system will try to reorient itself to being upright. And it'll use the worst habit because we don't find the clearest and most specific way of finding support for ourselves. You can watch people that are running and they're pounding themselves with how they place their feet on the ground, the shoes that they developed over the years, the different things, and people just through will force themselves to do the things they do rather than study efficiency. They don't study efficiency. Even if they go to a coach who's supposedly efficient, there will be elements within that study that for the most part won't be seen and understood by even their coaches, won't understand the specificity that people can find for their organization.
Yeah, so you mentioned there, we're talking about the football players and torn ACLs, things like that. We also kind of alluded to or mentioned little things that go on over a long period of time that create wear, rather than a traumatic injury you can see right away on the football field. And I think we have a lot of, you mentioned runners there, we have a lot of ultra runners that might listen to this podcast, and that is, they usually don't plant their foot wrong and tear their Achilles tendon. They usually have some kind of a chronic injury or problem or a lack of efficiency somewhere.
Well, and especially, I mean, to extol the virtues. I mean, look at the surfaces they're running over. So how adaptable they have to be with themselves and mobile within themselves to continue to find the support under the varying surfaces that they're running on, and to meet these extreme surfaces relative to, the necessity to maintain orientation, but to be able to work relative to fatigue. So it's a tremendous statement as to what these guys can do these days, and especially looking in the last 50 years as to where people are going with their training and what they can do.
Oh, it's just amazing, because a number of years ago, the first 100-mile race started, and it was like, well, people can't run 100 miles. Well, now they are. But after a number of years, that's the 200-mile races are starting and the 300-mile races. And it's pretty amazing what people can do. And there are people that go through those distances and they come out smiling, tired and smiling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are others that come through it through an act of will, and they damage themselves significantly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other side of it. And there is this funny question, this paradigm between doing this as a basis to determine your sense of worth, or whether you have a profound sense of worth and you're enjoying your life experience. If you're doing this in order to give yourself a sense of worth, then generally you'll drive yourself with your will, and at huge expense for yourself. If you're somewhat realized in yourself and somewhat you've come into some particular kind of self-fulfillment, in the sense that you have a sense of autonomy, you have a sense of enjoying your own life, and you're doing this out of just because it's fun for you, those are two completely different paradigms of being in the experience.
Right, and they always have. I don't know if it's one or the other for people, or if it's they go back and forth a little bit. Also, yeah.
Well, I know. I mean, I've worked with a lot of triathletes over the years, and so many of them are so emotionally harmed in some way in their life, and they use the endorphins, they use the running, it's an excuse not to experience and not to be with whatever happened to them before. And so, and they become addicted to not experiencing emotional pain by through being addicted to whatever they're doing, even though they're killing themselves to keep themselves from hurting.
Yeah, yeah, and you're talking about something that really damages people rather than.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
at that point in time, I mean, and so they become so addicted to the endorphins, they become so addicted to the exercise that the degree to which the damage that they've suffered to their knees and stuff. I know a particular person who's has to complete one or two more triathlons to get an automatic bid to Hawaii to the Ironman, or I don't know exactly how it works. The person is in agony and is willing to face the agony to accomplish getting to the Ironman. And at to me, I mean, obviously some considerable expense, because I would ask her, where's the joy? And the joy in completing the Ironman is short-lived. I ran a marathon one time. Yeah. I went to a friend of mine's house, and I said, so what are you doing? And he said, oh, I'm getting ready for a marathon. I said, great. I'll run it with you. When is it? He said, oh, it's in 3 weeks.
yeah, 3 weeks.
3 weeks. I said, oh, okay, I can get ready for that. At that point in time, I was running between 5 and 8 miles a day, and I was practicing Aikido between at least 5 hours a day.
Wow.
So I was in relatively overall functionally good condition. So it was a question of changing my orientation. And I set a goal of running under 4 hours, and I ran it in 3 hours and 56 minutes, which was, I mean, I thought it was acceptable. But the thing that was the most telling for me was, what was interesting was that I had not crossed I was 100 yards past the line, the finish line. Not even 100 yards. There was not a moment of appreciating and enjoying it. And my mind went to, actually, my cousin Greg won the first Ironman in Hawaii.
Really?
His name is Greg Haller. And so I go, okay, so I'll call Greg. I'll start training for a triathlon. I didn't have a moment where I just simply appreciated what I'd done. My mind already started skipping to, I'll amplify my training. That had nothing to do with my life goals. It had nothing to do with what I was about and personally and the things that I was studying and the things I was working with. It was a way that my mind went to a loop, and it would have been easy for me to climb on that loop. All I had to do was just, pack up shop and go to where Greg lived, and I could have just continued that particular kind of training, which, it has nothing, but it could have been attractive for a moment if I hadn't watched my mind create it. If I hadn't been in the place of having enough of a sense that I could watch my mind create it, rather than doing it from the point of view of fun with a friend, my mind was creating a something, and I was going to place my meaning of my life on that moment.
Yeah. And that's the loop that never quits, because it just keeps escalating, keeps going, and so on. I have known and talked to adventure athletes and triathletes that have so much fun when they're doing it.
Sure.
And see, I'm not as good an athlete as you, so I finished a very slow marathon a number of years ago, and I was so happy.
Right.
Yeah, I wanted to do it again, but and a very slow time, much over an hour. Let's see, yeah, well over an hour over what you did. But
yeah, I mean, I had a pretty good, anaerobic bed at that point in time. I mean, with the Aikido, which is a lot of anaerobic activity, and then the running that I was doing already, I was running the hills and the foothills near Palo Alto, and so it was very easy for me to go through that kind of terrain and to run. I mean, it was easy for me at that point in time to run for an hour and a half or 2 hours.
Yeah.
So
I love to do that.
To convert that wasn't that difficult for me. Yeah. But it's not anything that I would, seek to do today. I mean, I have to say that, being involved with the work of Feldenkrais has opened other doorways into finding delight and other characteristics within myself that were pretty deeply hidden from my own, from my own experience in my own childhood in the developmental stages. And you have to uncover, what it's like to enjoy serenity and tranquility and peace. And maybe you can find those in activities, but it's also nice to find them without having to be active.
Yeah. Well, the one thing about trail running, you're outside.
Exactly.
I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
To find those things in.
Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely. And there's nothing nicer than being outside in the environment as a source.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm thinking right now of somebody who actually maybe you know him, Courtney, know of them, Courtney DeWalter.
I don't know.
Oh, she's accomplished some fantastic things. But when she won the UTMB, the trail race, Mount Blanc,
yeah,
and she was the smile on her face was just ear to ear, and she was high-fiving all the spectators because she appreciated them so much, spent the extra time there,
right.
To congratulate all. I mean, she's just the joy just flows out of her.
Right. Yeah.
And, but for me, a number of years, 20 years ago, I fell off a roof and broke my ankle. Didn't get fixed right away, and then I found out it could be fixed, and I had that fixed, and then my knee wasn't working right because I'd been favoring this and trying to run on something that was actually broken for a year.
Right.
And I was thinking, this is really stupid. And I've worked in physical therapy now for a long time, but I was thinking maybe I ought to have it cut off so I can still run. That's such a dumb thing. But now the other day I was out there and there's another challenge. And I was thinking, well, I went through a process in the meantime. I went to see a physical therapist who made my problems worse. Then I went to another one who was an ultra runner. And the first thing he had me do was lift my leg up and put it down gently.
Yeah.
And so he gentled down everything I was doing. And I had a terrible inward conflict over that. You got to put aside all your strength and all your bull and china shop attitude. And now you have to do it gently and pay attention to what you're doing.
Right.
And he had a tiny working knowledge of the Feldenkrais method and Alexander technique. And that was quite a struggle, actually.
It's a major struggle for our egos. There's no question. Yeah.
And now the other day I was out running and I've discovered, that if you can use a method like the Maffetone method for heart rate training. It's very low heart rate training, at least 80, 90% of the time. So for me, I have to walk a lot of it.
Sure.
But what that means is now you're not getting, you don't have near the potential to get injured, being patient, and you have more time to notice things, but also you can absorb a lot more training. It's not hard to do. And so then I'm out there the other day and I'm doing this and I'm thinking, why am I out here? And now realizing that, from the things that I've learned, there's something different than just how much training can I do. I have kind of a responsibility,
right,
to notice what I'm doing, to do it more gently, and to take that into the world. And
yeah, I mean, it's a basic tenet for human beings, which is to do no harm. And that means to study our own violent tendencies and the way our mind attacks us, the way that we don't find ourselves adequate, and to not harm ourselves with our will against ourselves. That's hard. That's a real practice right there.
It is.
It's interesting that Moshe at Feldenkrais, who's the founder of this work that you and I have both studied, at the age of 19 in Palestine, he dislocated his knee playing soccer.
Yes, very badly. Yeah.
very, very badly, to the point that the doctors wanted to amputate his leg because they thought he would be better off with a prosthesis than with the leg that he had. And Moshe wouldn't let them cut off his leg. And he used himself as a study as to how can I find the way to pass force through myself, through my skeleton in such a way that it doesn't hurt. So he had to practice finding his legs. And of course, he studied judo for years afterwards. He recovered to the point that he could practice judo for
Which
years
is
when he went on to Paris.
totally amazing. Yeah.
Absolutely, completely amazing that he recovered his ability to find support for himself with attention and with an idea, knowing that he had to pass force through himself in such a way that he created no more damage.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a study.
That is. Yeah, you just mentioned something there. Why is there violence in the world? Well, all we have to do is kind of look at ourselves.
It doesn't take much to find out how hard we are with our own mind with ourselves.
Yeah.
And mostly we've acquired from somewhere in our development, something in our self-image, we've acquired this voice these voices that we use. If you listen really, really carefully to whose voice it is, you find out that it's not really yours. You acquired this voice. You acquired, I mean, I can remember from years that I was a much better athlete than my father. I was not anywhere near him as a student. He was a Mensa scholar and a chemical engineer, and was known for his work in the paper making industry. My dad invented the major processes of waste treatment that paper mills use today. My father was the author of most of those processes. He was a brilliant man. He was a man that was deeply wounded. He was in both at the end of World War II and in Korea. And he never spoke about these things. It was as part of the age, but he had a sense of privacy. But if we were on the golf course, even when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, and I was learning the game of golf and I would hit a shot and he would say, "Shame on you," because he would never hit a shot that way. He never had the coordination for that to happen. And there was something about it that was there was something wrong with me for showing him up. And the funny thing is that shame on you resounded in me, because there was a way in which he said shame on you, or would make statements that continued to, in some sense, give him a sense that he was okay, not necessarily that I was okay. And it wasn't that he didn't love me, it was that he didn't know how to engender this voice, because it was the voice he had within himself coming from a really abusive relationship with his parents. It was just passed on generationally. My job over my 70 years, I'm 71 now, is to learn to recognize this voice and to find out, is there a place of kindness within myself? You know? And it's not to find in what I can produce a sense of well-being, but to come and to encapsulate deeply within me what's autonomous and what's always been there, the sense of being and well-being. But to uncover that. And part of the thing that with this work, it's not that it goes against athletics. It's that it invites the athlete to find these qualities within themselves and enjoy the hell out of what they're doing, rather than using the being in the paradigm of using their own violence to drive them, yeah? and to make another shift from violence and will to skill and enjoyment.
Yeah, I recently talked to an athlete that said that she looked back on an injury. She said, "I needed to be injured. I needed that break. You know,
Yeah.
the pressure was so much." Yeah.
The,
So
the universe
that,
can be extraordinarily kind to us and take away from us, that which that we thought that it was the greatest value to us. And when we lose it, we start to find that it's the same thing that happens in someone who's in a midlife crisis. And they've succeeded beyond their imagination in their life. They have everything they want, and then look around themselves and say, "Is this all there is?" And for the runner, and I've lost my ability to run. I've lost my ability to perform. I mean, the other day when I was on the basketball court, sarcopenia has completely taken over. The net was hung up on the basket, and I was going to jump up and just pull the net down, and I couldn't even grab the damn net.
yeah.
And to watch,
Well, I just turned 70 this year.
just to watch this loss relative to my memory of my false memory of what I could do.
Yeah. Yeah. That raises another thing here. Moshe used to say, I understand that if you know what you're doing, you can do what you want.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, when he was a young man and had his first really severe knee injury, he didn't know what to do. So he went to the doctors, and then he began to explore. Once he made the decision to explore it on his own, he spent a lot of time exploring, and he spent a lot of time exploring on his back. And initially, would you say when he began his explorations, maybe he didn't know what he was doing in terms of his knee?
Yeah, I think he didn't know what he was doing. And I mean, look, let's be reasonable here. If you know what you're doing, you can do what you want within an aesthetic value to yourself. Let's qualify it. It
Right.
doesn't mean that I can get in an airplane and I'm gonna land like Sully on the Hudson River. If I've been flying for 30 hours or 100 hours, that doesn't mean that I'm going to have the years and years of experience that I can. It means that I can find an aesthetic within myself where it's enjoyable. It doesn't mean
I think that's a wonderful point there, because when you first hear that, if you know what you're doing, you can do what you want. It sounds like a fairly simple statement, but it really isn't. It's actually quite profound, because what is knowing what you're doing? And in the end, what is doing what you want? And I think as I worked as a physical therapist assistant for a while, sometimes I would take that in a way that was not what you just explained. And I would think, this patient, if they can just see this, they can do what they want.
Right.
So you have a patient that's been laying in bed with a severe injury to his head, maybe the spine too, for years, and he wants to get up and walk.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say he can't, but you work with him for a while, and as human beings, this goal-oriented thing is greedy.
Well,
I just want what I want it, instead of the aesthetic that you just brought out.
Yeah.
Go
ahead. Go ahead.
Well, we can always improve.
Right.
But I think you talk about being in the present moment. So what's the present moment? The present moment is our reality now. And if you can find that, I think that's what that was for Moshe when he started his explorations. His present moment, his reality then, was lying on the floor exploring.
Yeah, he had an intuition that understood that if he's obviously in the field of gravity, but if he's not standing upright in the field of gravity and he's supported by the floor, then his the anti-gravity aspect of the way that he orients himself can become quiet. That means that area of his nervous system is open to new variability. But learning to do knowing what you're doing means that I can be in the place moment by moment in perception. And that means in perception, and you're freezing the screen, okay. Yeah. But this question of whether or not you're in this pragmatic, concrete process of paying attention precisely to what you're doing, it's at that moment you can do what you want. That means you can inhibit a pattern that's not useful and you can begin to explore something new. That's what it means, but it doesn't mean that I can go to the driving range, hit buckets for 5 days, and I'm going to be able to go on the PGA Tour. I would, even if I spent 30 or 40 or 50 years, it was never, it was, I might have, who knows, but it was, yeah. So the question of doing what you want means knowing how to do. And that means, how do I study exactly in the moment in a pragmatic, concrete way, not in a mental way, like I'm studying my mind in my meditation. I'm watching my mind rise. I'm learning to watch the intention of my actions rise, which is concrete and pragmatic. I can feel it as the flow spreads through, the innervation spreads through the musculature, and I can watch the pattern arise in me, and I can determine if that pattern is moving me in a new way or if it's an old way. I can study my habit, and I can learn to inhibit my habit so that I can do something new. But I have to be clear as to what is it that I want. I want to be able to do something new in a quality that appeals to me.
Right. So it's funny that I heard that for so long. If you know what you're doing, you can do what you want. And it's just in the last little while, it's been dawning on me what that means in a more clear way. Because when you're working with somebody, I think that's where I've not done what I would have liked to accomplish with them sometimes, is to get them to be in the moment pragmatically, as you just described, and then go from there. Because people, they don't want that moment, they want that goal.
They want the goal.
And so they miss the moment for the goal. Where if they were in the moment, who knows what might unfold out of that.
Here's what's interesting to me. The research that I just recently read, that every single dendrite, so that means the nerve flow from the axons through the neurological gap.
Well,
to the dendrite.
The synapse.
To the synapse to the dendrite.
Yeah.
That every single dendrite has the capacity for variability equal to the brain itself.
Wow.
So instead of thinking of the dendrite as a pass-through process, that a neurological process passes through, that every dendrite has within it the potential for neurological variability. It compounds the potential in the human brain beyond the incomprehensible. How have we even come close to imagining what the human potential is? And so in every single infinite moment is an infinite potential that has never been addressed. And the only thing that keeps us from that is our consensual reality, the way that we've been in our self-image, the way that we govern our actions through the way that we've been conditioned. Now, how do we?
Yeah, in that conditioning.
Yeah. Just look at the basketball game now. Look at the game of basketball. The player from Portland. What's his name? It'll come to me. The point guard, the shooting guard for Portland, steps across the half court line and shoots, and he's making 30 to 40%. One step past the half court line.
Wow.
Look what Steph Curry did to the game. Look what he did to handling the basketball. But then you go back and look at Pete Maravich. Then you look at Bob Cousy, and then you look at the generational gaps. Then these generational players who become archetypes of the game. They create an archetypal image that every player then, if they want to play, has to begin to move towards that potential. And we see it with the running now. You said 200 miles, 300 miles. There's what's to keep the human potential down. The only thing is our imagination. Moshe said the The only thing that fixes us in our beliefs is our beliefs that the belief that it's so. And so
Yeah.
there's an incredible
Yeah, so
that hasn't been tapped.
and again, we don't know what it is. I mean, because
That's the thing with potential. You cannot be, you have to be in the unknown to find potential. Otherwise, it's your history and the bringing forward of your history over and over again. You must be in a place, a quiet place of listening from which something new can emerge. Some potential emerges.
Yeah.
Out of an unconscious imagery.
Yeah, there's been
out of pre-verbal images. And we don't know where it's going to go. We don't know what it's going to be. We just
if we would be quiet more.
Well, look at the guy who just climbed Yosemite, climbed El Cap, or is it El Cap or
yeah? Oh yeah.
Climbed it.
Yeah.
Climbed it.
Yeah, I think I know his name, but I'm not sure.
Arno or
Alex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But look at look at the preparation.
He had done that. Yeah, the preparation. He had that thing memorized, and he had exactly what the timing for every single thing he did he had prepared for.
Yeah, extraordinary.
It wasn't just a matter of, I have the skill to do this. Yeah. Yeah, tremendous preparation for that.
But I mean, he had the vision. He had the means to deal with himself emotionally. He had the ability to relate to fear in such a way that fear became an advantage rather than something that stopped him. He progressed himself. I think it was years, 10, 12 years of preparation of going through each aspect of the climb, going to a couple times, going with the intention to climb and stopping, knowing that it wasn't right.
Yeah. That's awareness.
The guy's name, I call him a kid. Damian Lillard is the player who's plays for Portland. They call him Dame. What time is it? It's Dame time.
Yeah.
And you can watch him practice. He's shooting jump shots. A standard jump shot. I used to be proud of being able to shoot an 18 to 20 foot jump shot. Yeah. He's shooting from 40 to 45 feet.
Yeah.
Like a jump shot. Yeah. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Now that's vision.
Like
That's potential. That's extending the game. I mean, look at the game of golf.
Yeah.
You see the game of golf that these guys play now. So that's vision. It's extraordinary.
It's extraordinary, yeah. As soon as you begin to realize that small distinctions can make a big difference, you can apply that everywhere. You could apply that on the fly even. If you're running and you see something's happening, you can always change something. And you may be able to feel a shear force developing somewhere. You know, maybe your sacrum or your L1, S1, L5 in that area, something like that, a little strain. If you're really aware of that, you can stop and reset, or you could even shorten your stride, do something to where you're finding more support. But and I've been through processes where my knee's bothering me with something, And all I did was pay attention to it for a long time. And then I would come up with a realization, say that, oh, I'm not integrating the movement of my knee with the rotation of my pelvis.
Sure.
But I explained that, but it doesn't mean anything. But eventually I felt it.
Right.
And now I don't force anything with my knee when I'm running. And but the Feldenkrais method can actually shorten that process
Well,
a lot.
you learn the process of paying attention and asking the questions, and you can be with the difficulty, and you can learn to be with the difficulty in such a way that you can find answers within yourself that where you find some kind of pleasure in being in the question rather than in the drive.
Yeah.
Again, that's if you know what
Yeah.
you're doing, where you place your attention. It's two different
Yeah.
paradigms. One is to bull your way
Yeah.
through. The other one is how can I make this possible for myself?
Yeah. 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 So I'm really glad that we clarified. If you know what you're doing, you can do what you want, because that can be interpreted with the bull your way through it mentality. And yeah, that's I appreciate that clarification. So
Yeah.
is there anything else that you would want to add to our conversation? I just think it was great. Tremendous.
Well, I mean, sure. I mean, if people want to contact me or contact you, I mean, you should probably tell them where I am. I'm at insidemoves.org.
Yeah, you're in Seattle. Would you contact information here now?
Yeah, I'm in
What your website?
insidemoves.org.
Yeah, insidemoves.org.
Yeah, people can contact me through there. If people are interested in my in classes in awareness through movement, I teach class every Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock Pacific time and every Thursday evening, 7 o'clock Pacific time. The 7 o'clock class in the evening invites all my friends from Eurasia to come, because it's the next day, but it's the afternoon for them. And the 10 o'clock in the morning invites all my friends from Europe to come. So I can speak to the people from the different time zones, and they can fit themselves into the schedule. And so I'm continually teaching classes. The classes at this point in time are free or by donation. So if people want to hang out with how I teach awareness through movement and functional integration in the Feldenkrais method, they can find that information on my website or just by writing to me at jeff@insidemoves.org, and I'll get them to the right place.
Okay, so Jeff, I want to really thank you for being here. I've really enjoyed it. I think there were some gems here. So infinite potential.
Yes.
If we can just slow down, not be distracted, be in the moment, and move from there.
Yeah. I mean, for some people, it'll disrupt their athletic activity because they'll find maybe they want to be artists, but who knows? But on the other hand, it may make it so that that their training experience can become a question of joy rather than being hard on themselves.
Yeah. All right, Jeff. Thank you so much.
God,
and
thanks for inviting me.